Loud. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. This is our second season or second round, if you will. Uh, Thanks again for everybody for the support in telling me to do more of these interviews. So I'm trying to interview people a little bit outside my circle, and you're going to see that a lot tonight with my guest. I'm going to introduce him, and then he's just going to tell you really quickly what he does in a nutshell, if you will, like that's possible to describe what we do in a nutshell, and then we'll do what we usually do. So my guest tonight is Andy Sorensen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
So what do you do? Like we can't tell with the wall of equipment behind you.
Yeah, I make music. Guitarist, composer, producer, engineer. Very fortunate to be involved in a lot of different projects of a lot of different styles. I have my own band, Atlas Gray, based in Hartford, Connecticut. I also work with a hip hop artist named Who Am I? I produce music with my good friend Rob Griffith, um, and I make music for meditation and all sorts of stuff like that for my wife's business and some other businesses. So it's sort of like a mix of everything.
Now, the connection that you and I have, it was very brief, and like we were saying before you hit the record button, you and I don't know each other too well, and that's I think going to benefit us in this interview because I'm I don't know where this is going to take us, so I think this is going to be a lot of fun. But our brief encounter, correct me if I'm wrong, was through Isaac Young.
Yes.
So you and I think we played a gig not together. Well, we played the same gig, but not on stage together. It was when Isaac recorded
Yeah.
some music. Is that the same Rob? The That's a different Rob, right?
Different
No,
Rob.
no, that's different. Never mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the Rob from a couple interviews ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never even met the guy, and his name has shown up.
Yeah.
Um,
With
but
Isaac, I was in his quartet like right after college, if I remember right.
okay.
So where did that crossover with us then? That was
So then, so Isaac recorded some music, and I went to a studio and recorded
yeah.
this psychedelic guitar solo with that guitar.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, look, dude, because Isaac was still pretty jazzy at the time.
Mm,
And for those of you who don't know, Isaac is a jazz saxophone player,
mhm.
had a quartet. Then he does all sorts of cool stuff. Then went to playing keyboards mostly, and now it's like fusiony jazz, like rock. I don't even know how to describe it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I played a gig with you, I believe, when after I recorded that music, he did a gig at La Paloma Sabanera,
Oh,
the
yes.
first location
Uh-huh.
on Park Street. No,
Um, I know exactly where it is. I don't remember the street name, but I know, yes, I remember that now. That's crazy. I haven't thought about that in years.
and so I played that with him,
Uh-huh.
and I played the solo, and then I got off stage, and you guys went up and did the scary jazz stuff.
Yeah, the jazz stuff. Yeah.
So so that's where we kind of met. And then did you play with, was it you who played with Kevin Scott and all of them?
I don't think so.
Did
No.
you play? Okay, okay, that's somebody else. So you talked about playing music with Isaac, and I'm assuming you went to school with him too.
Yes. Yeah, I was at Hart at the same time. Yeah.
And what did you study at Hart?
I was in acoustics and music, so acoustical engineering was like my main degree, and with jazz guitar. So it was pretty much like a double major. It's sort of funny in a way that it's like I forget it's less than 5 credits short of a full double major. So it's
Isn't music school like that? Music school just has to get you. They just have to shortchange you on something.
exactly, yeah, yeah. And the funny thing was at the time and still, I graduated with an engineering degree um, from the engineering school, but I was so close to that, music degree as well. But I never cared then, and I don't care now.
Yeah.
Which, in hindsight, I feel good about because, as you've probably experienced, it might be different in the classical world actually, but in the rock world or studio world or everything with my band and whatnot, I've never ever been asked in any scenario if I went to music school or where I went or, you know, any of those things. Like
Sure, sure.
even thought about it. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, well, yeah, you know, I didn't need to do anything more to get that degree, you know,
Right, right.
whatever,
Let's
however much.
let's work up to Hart, talk about, because a lot of people on this show go to Hart because that's where I went for my master's, and a lot of those people are in my circle. So we'll talk a little bit about what you did before, kind of what happened at Hart. Maybe we'll get a different story from the classical guitarist that I talked to, and then I want to hear what you do with all that beautiful equipment behind you. I'm especially interested in that big white thing. It looks like an old Vox, but it's probably not.
Oh, right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
with my hand right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Morgan amp.
Oh, okay.
So the fancy kind of
Hmm.
finish that looks cool on it.
That is
Um,
beautiful.
but yeah, super
The
cute.
only thing this is the last one I have,
Oh, nice. PRS.
and I'll tell you the quick story, and then we'll get back to you, the man of the hour. But the story was, I was a metalhead at the time,
Awesome.
and I went in and I said, I'm gonna buy the new Mesa Boogie Mark V,
Yeah, yeah.
and I went into Guitar Center,
It's the
and
perfect
when
for your Petrucci model.
well, so I was really happy with, I had the Roadster, which is like the Road King Light, and it did all of these. It was basically a dual rectifier with a couple of bells and whistles.
Yeah, yeah,
And I said, I want a smoother sound because the rectifier is an extremely versatile amp,
yeah,
but if that's not what you want, it's like a Strat, right? The rectifier is sort of like a Strat. Like you can use it almost everywhere, but
right.
if you don't want that sound, that's all it does.
Yeah, okay.
So I went in looking for a Mark V, and this was secondhand, $1,000 cheaper, and I was really happy with the sound.
Awesome. Yeah.
So you studied jazz, which has a bunch of notes in it.
Yeah.
But before we get there, tell me about what music was like when you were growing up.
Oh, music growing up for me was definitely classic rock. Um, you know, for the most part, and then the grunge scene was like right when I was growing up, you know. So like the first two things that ever got me into guitar big time that made me say like I want to play when I was 10 were Nirvana, you know, which I'm sure was the same for many people, you know. That came out and it was like, what is this? This is cool.
Yeah.
And I also remember I've thought about this a bunch when I've been asked, and I feel like I have this memory. I don't know how accurate it is at this point, but I don't know if my parents were watching it live or if I ended up seeing it or if they showed it to me directly. But the Clapton Unplugged concert,
Yeah.
you know, I remember that leaving like a serious mark on me and being like, wow, that is, you know, I don't know what that is, but that's awesome. You know,
Yeah.
that's still to this day is one of my top five favorite records ever.
I was just talking about that album with somebody, and you can, as good and as educated and as refined as your tastes get, you
Yeah.
can still go back to that album and pick something up, like
Oh,
not even Layla, but like Singe, right? That's the track.
yeah.
Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Tears
It's
in Tears in Heaven is great.
absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, that record is just a testament to obviously Clapton is a, you know, legendary guitarist, but his songwriting and his just overall musicality is just
Yeah,
roof, especially in that setting. You know,
yeah,
and the other guitarists he's playing with, Andy Fairweatherlow on
yes, yep,
the record,
yep,
it's hard to tell who's playing what at any given time,
yeah,
which is one of the most impressive things to me I've ever heard because they're listening so deeply to each other that the entire time it's just weaving in and out. Nobody's ever stepping on each other's feet.
right,
They're just making music. You know, they
yeah,
didn't ever play guitar. They just played music in that, you know, record. It's
yeah.
awesome. It's so good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure most of those guys he kept. The percussionist, the guy who looked like the Six Flags guy, the bald guy with the huge bottleneck glasses,
Oh yeah,
playing
yeah.
the bongos. I know he was around for a long time. I'm pretty sure Nathan East was on that album.
I think yeah.
Um,
I mean he's been with Clapton for years. Yeah, yeah.
and it's,
I think it was Steve Ferrone on drums on that record,
oh, okay, okay,
from Petty and the Heartbreakers. Yeah.
yep, yep,
And I always thought it might have been Steve Gadd because Steve Gadd plays for Clapton a lot, but
sure,
you know, Yeah, it was, I mean, an all-star group, and it showed. You know?
And yeah, and it really speaks to, you're right, Clapton, as you know, we're used to saying Clapton is God, and you know, in some ways he is, and you see him because very similar to you, if you remember the Kazaa days, uh, I downloaded, or it may have been LimeWire, I downloaded Clapton. I don't know what it was. It was some live Layla performance somewhere.
Yeah.
And you know you can't really wear the grooves out of an MP3 or
Yeah.
an MP4 or whatever it was. I'll find it later, but
Yeah.
that was something that sparked something for me before I even picked up the guitar,
Yeah, it's amazing.
just to watch him. And I don't play any of his music anymore, and I don't really listen to much of his music, but I bet you if I watch that
Yeah.
video later, I'll tear up or something.
Oh, and you know, that's an interesting point that you brought up right there about like seeing it before
Yeah.
you play. You know, I think I heard somebody else speaking about this like you know, a couple years ago, listening to a podcast or something. But you know, now thinking about that, it's sort of profound to think about. But all of the players that, you know, most of us admire, or you know, just the legendary players, you know, it's hard to summarize. They all have a physical look to them when they play,
Oh
like
my God, yeah.
hands move, the way everything, I'm sure it's the same in the classical world, and it's so iconic to just see, even let
Yeah.
alone hear. You know, like Carlos Santana or Stevie Ray Vaughan with the vibrato, or
Yeah.
you know, Hendrix. Obviously, there was just so much there. You can't even, you know, go there with that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's this like visual aspect to the playing that's so like elegant at times. You know, when people have that amount of fluidity. You know.
That's a really good word to describe it. Elegance. I can see Clapton's. I can see him playing that Layla, the high one.
Yeah.
I could see it, and my fingers. For the longest time, I tried to look like that. And my fingers just don't look like that. If I want to play it the way he plays it, my fingers can't look like that, and that's cool. So music was always a part. Did you play guitar in high school and sort of get into it that way?
Yeah, I started when I was 10, and then I started taking lessons with some, you know, local teachers, and took lessons with a few local teachers. And then my teacher in high school, in high school, I was really into the hard rock metal stuff, like a lot of
Yeah.
us, you know, Dream Theater, Ozzy Osbourne, you know, all that kind of stuff, Steve Vai,
Yeah.
you know, everything. Because I think when we're young, we love to, you know, just go for it. Like, give me the hardest thing I can find, the fastest thing, you know, and I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
So my friends and I were playing that kind of stuff all the time, and you know, it was a blast. And then my teacher at the time in high school, Sean Townsend, he, you know, at the time it felt like he forced jazz on me. You
Hmm.
know, where he was like, hey, you know, here's Autumn Leaves, and I'm like, what is this, you know?
It's so slow.
Yeah, I'm like, this is slow and beat, and you know, like, I don't want this clean sounds, you know, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
um but you know, it quickly grew on me, actually, you know, because I was so into improvisation that the second I, you know, worked through that initial hump of it's jazz,
Right.
at that age, you know, I was like, wow, this is actually really awesome. You know, and it's a whole nother way to express yourself and to improvise.
Where did you go to school? High school.
High school, Downingtown, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
like 40 minutes or so outside Philadelphia.
Cool. Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I mean, it was so that sort of opened my eyes to that. In high school, we had, you know, bands and whatnot. Um, but yeah, we'd play hard rock stuff, we'd play jazz band, we'd do whatever. But I
Yeah.
wasn't really involved with music in school very much. I did jazz band 1 year, and I did like the general music course for everything else. I never played other instruments or did any of that stuff. So I was sort of removed from that whole music scene in
Right.
school, and just played with my friends, you know.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. As someone who teaches middle school music, and my middle school and high school are in the same building, and so there's times when I see the kids that I taught in middle school get up into the high school, or there's times when I've worked with high schoolers with the guitar and this and that. And, you don't, it certainly provides you with a certain set of tools um, to be able to play in any ensemble, at that age. But then also, I mean, I think you and I are both proof of you don't necessarily need that to have a career in music. You just have to find those tools elsewhere. So if you grew up down there, or
Hmm.
really to the left and down.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, my father grew up right outside of Philadelphia.
Nice. What town?
He grew up
Mhm.
in. He's going to be watching this too. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
literally it's literally like, I want to say it was like 10 miles north
Okay.
of downtown.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. It's a
He
great
went to
town
he
there.
went to George Washington High School. Is that right?
That sounds familiar. Uh,
Okay.
I'm not familiar with the northern side really because I was southeast of Philadelphia,
Okay.
I believe. Yeah.
Um, so what brought you to Hartford?
The Hart School. And
Yeah.
when I was, it's funny, back to the teaching thing actually for a second. And in high school, all I did was guitar. Like I loved it. I just played constantly. And when it came to thinking about what I was going to do for college, go to school for and study, um, at first it didn't cross my mind to study music, which
Yeah.
is very strange. And I, somewhat owe that to my guitar teacher at the time again, where he was like, hey, what are you doing for school? And I was like, engineering. And he's like, what? you know, like, this is what you do all day and you love, like, you can go to school for that, So I was just sort of like, oh, well, I guess I can, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then, because of my interest in math and engineering and all that kind of stuff, I was like, well, what if I do like a double major with either music production and studio stuff or acoustical engineering, which is what I ended up doing, and then guitar as well. So I started looking for programs all around the country, and the best one that pretty much existed for that was Hart,
Yeah.
with engineering school there. And other great schools had similar things, but their requirements were way more niche. Um,
Yeah.
so like, some schools had that double major thing, but you had to do this exact track of classes, or I would have had to play classical guitar instead at one,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. So it sort of just worked out that that was like the best choice.
Yeah.
So that brought me up here.
Hart, I don't know. I don't know about now because things have changed, and hopefully, with some interviews that I'm trying to schedule, we'll get a little more information about where Hart is right now.
Yeah.
But Hart for a long time, I mean, I went there for grad school,
Hmm.
and I went there because of my teacher, not so much because of the program. I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and but Hart has a reputation, the Hart School, not the university,
yeah, yeah.
of being really top notch for performance
Yes.
in classical and in jazz music, because there's a lot of legends that walk through those doors either as guests or as
Yeah,
students.
absolutely. Yeah.
So we'll talk about the jazz stuff in a second, but tell
Mhm.
me what it was like studying engineering, acoustic engineering, being the guy behind the booth, behind the glass, who's going, play it again,
Oh, so
smash.
so acoustical engineering is actually way different than that. That's more,
Okay.
that's like more of what I do now. But
I was being sort of facetious. What was it like studying that?
yeah, yeah. Acoustical engineering is like an actual mechanical engineering thing, outside of all the music world. Um,
Okay.
Everything from in the more music side, it would be the actual architectural engineering of like concert halls and studios,
Oh wow.
all the way to designing things like ultrasound and hearing aids, um, anything that has to do with acoustic technology like that. There's a lot of military stuff with sonar, for submarines and all that kind of stuff. It's vast, but that's actually what it was. So it was all math, all engineering, like nothing to do with music, per se,
Wow.
that kind of thing. So it was a lot of work.
And so what did you see as sort of like you went to school right after high school? You went to college right after high school?
Right after, yeah.
So that's such a young age to know what you want to do, but did you have an idea of what you wanted to do with the engineering stuff, or were you just sort of like, this is interesting, I know I could be good at it,
I
I'm going
think,
to study it.
yeah, I think it's that, it was more of like, I don't know if I was doing like I hate to use this word, but like a backup,
Right.
thing or something like that, which is long gone now. But that kind of concept where it's like, I know I enjoy mathematics, I know I enjoy engineering stuff, and this being on the acoustical side involves everything about sound and has some crossover into everything else I love, guitar.
Right.
So it sort of felt natural, like this is a way for me to combine all the things I dig, into one kind of pot.
I
Um,
don't think that's I understand the feeling of saying that word or to have that philosophy of a backup,
yeah,
but um I don't think it's so terrible because sometimes it's for me it saved me getting my undergrad in
yeah,
music ed.
that's awesome. Yeah,
I mean, I've said this on the show before. I was doing the hustling thing, and I remember at the time when I was finishing my master's, I was working at a grocery store. I was teaching in three different studios. I was teaching at home. I was gigging. I was studying for my master's, and I was making like 28 grand a year. And I was thinking, I deserve more than everybody does. I'm not trying to crap on any of the musicians, but like we collectively deserve more for that work.
yeah,
And thank God I have the certification for my lifestyle to be able to go teach and then go do the other stuff in addition.
totally.
And it's funny when you're talking, I'm thinking about all of the famous scientist legend guitar players like Brian May, of course, but like um, Jeff Baxter, Skunk Baxter, right?
Yeah, huge one. And also, oh man, oh, his name's escaping me. He's an LA dude, I'm pretty sure. He's also like a marine biologist and studies stuff in Antarctica for most of the year.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's a few actually. It's interesting.
And they just happen to be like the sickest guitarists in the world. Like if you listen to the solo from my old school, like if we just pull it, like that's a nasty solo.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, I'm gonna go work for NASA. Peace.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of crazy, but hey, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
uh,
So when you studied jazz, was that with Rich?
yes, it was. Yeah.
So I had one I tested out of his class because I just had too much on my plate to do it during my master's, but we jammed to Blue Bossa.
Nice.
And I knew him at Central Connecticut State University because he and my teacher Chris Ladd, who I went to go study with at Hart,
Uh-huh.
both taught there adjunct. So they taught at Hart full time and then adjunct at Central.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I saw Rich play a couple times, and he's filthy.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Great dude. Yeah. Great,
Can
great.
you can you talk about Rich a little bit, and then also what the jazz program at Hart was like for you?
Yeah, the jazz, well, partially I was, because of the double major acoustics thing, I was a little bit, I'd say like 20% outside of like the tight jazz world that existed at Hart. Um, and so like I didn't have to take some of the biggest classes that all the performance majors took. I had to take like all the core stuff, ensembles and lessons and theory and ear training and all that. So socially, I was a little bit on the outside of that world. Um, but it was great because I sort of, once again had both things going on, got to experience a lot of different things. I got to work with Rich and Randy Johnston too. He would come and teach once in a while. Um, and got to play in the ensembles, all that kind of stuff. So it was a blast for sure. It definitely it showed me a lot of things. I think part of the way through it, I was fully immersed in that jazz mindset, you know, which is what you need to be to really excel at something like that, or anything, you know, for that matter. But I think as it went on, I slowly started to realize, or adjust my perspective on it in a way that allowed me to take what I was learning and apply it to the styles that I'm, you know, more drawn to, you know, ultimately, um, which has been fantastic. So it's, you know, taking all that knowledge, the ability, whatever you learn, and applying it to any style of music, you know. So I think I went through like it felt, in hindsight, it feels like it was sort of like an evolution of like, I came in, I was like, whoa, this is, you know, a next level, like most freshmen probably feel like, you know, in school. um,
Right.
and then went for it full out. And then by the time senior year was coming around, it was like, ooh, what am I going to play after this? And then sort of realizing, well, I don't know if I want to pursue a career in jazz. I love it. I love it as an art form. I've learned so much, but starting to shift my perspective to be like, where can these skills and these tools take me? You know,
Right.
that kind of thing.
I think what I the thing that bothers one of the things that bothers me the most about the classical guitar is that a lot of those skills aren't transferable. And I'll explain that more, but it comes down to the fact that the technique to make music on a nylon string guitar that we use
Yeah, yeah,
is very different from the technique that you use, or that I would use on an electric guitar. And
yeah,
that seems like small potatoes, but it's not for uh, a piano player, right? My friend Brett studied classical and jazz.
yeah,
Now I'm sure technique is viewed in a different mindset depending in those two schools
yeah, yeah,
of creating music.
mhm,
But at the same time, he doesn't have to change his anatomy like we have
yeah,
the fingernails. He doesn't have to change the devices in which he uses to put a note in motion, right? Which is what we do. So that's something that currently I'm struggling with as a classical guitar player, because there's plenty of things that I think the classical guitar has to offer
mhm,
socially,
yeah.
but we've kind of boxed ourselves in one way or another because of the physicality of it. And yeah, I don't know if that made any sense.
No, definitely. That's super interesting because I, you know, in my mind, on a surface level, I've always thought of, you know, the classical guitar world. Those are the people who have technique, you know, whereas like everybody
Yeah,
else, I guess they have technique, but it varies so much per person that, you know, at least in my experience, you know,
yeah,
teaching and talking to my peers about it, people in like the rock world, jazz world, anything like that, everybody plays so differently than the next person, and they
right,
achieve a great result that the longer I go, every year, at least in my kind of zone, I believe in like technique less. You know, in
that,
a
yeah,
way,
yeah,
yeah, at least a formalized version of it. You know,
sure,
obviously good technique you know, creates good sound and good playing, but good technique is different for every person in
right,
this kind of capacity. Whereas I see, like, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm
right,
in the classical world, it seems like there's more of like a guideline as to this will help you achieve a great sound
right.
if you do it this way, kind of thing.
That's correct. There's a lot of things. One of the things that I like, because I need that kind of direction in my life, is that a lot of the things in classical guitar are very what's the word? Not programmatic. They're built on top of each other, right? So you cannot do step three if you haven't done step one and step two. You physically can't do it.
Yeah,
You can't get a good sound if you don't know which direction the string is moving on your fingernail.
yeah,
You can't play a sequence was the word I'm looking for. It's very sequenced in that fashion.
yeah, yeah.
And that, for me, that's really helpful. But
Mhm.
in terms of technique, yeah, we have technique, but it's to serve a certain purpose, just like everybody. But I don't feel, and this is where I'm again bumping up with that boundary of where does classical guitar stop? When can we push it into other genres and use what we do? Is
Right.
that the technique that we do serves our music, and I don't feel like it's very transferable. I could play scales pretty fast with these two fingers,
Yeah.
but that's not going to help me on this guitar. My nails will break right off, and
Yeah.
it doesn't even sound very good.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
You know what I mean? And the if we're talking about just one specific kind of technique, when I
Mhm.
watch John Petrucci murder some guitar solo, I would say about half of the things that I do are transferable to what he does. So it's a completely different idea. We don't have the same kind of vibrato as electric guitar players. And electric guitar players, we usually use the fingers or even go vertically, right? We
Yeah.
swing the elbow.
Yeah.
John Petrucci isn't doing that. Nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
So in some regards, yeah, it crosses over, and some not so much.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is a
Yeah,
very, almost a different instrument to that regard, like
right.
ergonomics of it are totally different, and it's, um, yeah, there, I mean, there has to be stuff that we can learn from each other in those senses, um, I think I have always admired the discipline of classical guitar players to like, take the time to get those steps right, like you're talking about,
Yeah, yeah.
because I don't know if I've ever done that with anything like that. Um, but yeah, it's awesome. It's fantastic.
So you finish school,
Mhm.
you're playing jazz. What kind of guitar are you playing jazz on?
I was playing an Ibanez John Scofield signature model. Fantastic semi hollow body guitar. Love that thing.
I'm gonna pull up a picture right now because I want to see it.
Yep. It is called, I forget. Yeah, JSM 100. I got that about halfway through college. Actually, about a third of the way through college because I was playing a Strat up until then because I was a Clapton head. Um, and then I was like, I need to get more in the jazz world. Let me get a jazzier sounding guitar. So
Let me get something that my school will respect.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I went
Uh,
from playing, tens on a Strat to 12s on this.
is that it right there?
Yeah, that's it. Yep. Hmm.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Actually, a few years ago, maybe even 5 or 6 now, I sold it at least, yeah, 6, 7 maybe. I sold it to a great student that I had, who went to the University of Miami for jazz guitar.
Oh, cool.
And it felt good to I
Pass
was
the
still
torch.
to sell it, but I was like, to a student, a friend, I was like, absolutely.
What kind of guitar does Rich play?
When I was there, he had an Ibanez as well. I think he had the George Benson model.
Oh, wow.
But I'm sure that's changed a bunch over the years, but I'm not sure what he plays
Yeah.
now. But yeah, it's great.
That's the thing, again, about it's like, I don't know. I'm thinking in my brain it's like some sort of curve where it starts off like where electric guitarists are playing a ton of gear, but then the better you get, the more you just play one instrument, right?
That can happen.
And and so I'm thinking of, and that's super. That's how classical guitarists work, right? Because partly because our instruments cost so damn much,
Like,
and we buy one and we're just like, okay, I'm done. But like I think about someone like Clapton or someone like Rich or someone like I always saw him with the same guitar,
totally, yeah.
because you find something that works for you, and there's no need to have 50 different things.
And I think it's all dependent upon your role too. The reason I have an array of things is for studio work. It's a great tool.
Yeah,
Be able to like switch guitars for the sound that I want or an artist wants or anything.
sure.
Um, when it comes to playing in my band, the original stuff, I agree. My voice as an individual and in the band setting is very much linked to certain guitars way more than others.
Right.
So in one way they're all tools and you just have a palette of colors, and in another way it's like a deeper expression of your voice, when you find those ones that are like, yeah, this is me, kind of thing.
Yeah. So you finish school, you're playing, um, you're gigging mostly jazz kind of stuff? Like what, how are you making your income when you finish
Um,
school?
so this is actually an interesting thing. I graduated in 2009, so that was when
Hmm.
the economy tanked, right? And I
Hmm.
was thinking about, maybe I'll get a part-time engineering job to pay me some money or, kind of thing, and I'll do music. None of that was a possibility,
Wow.
because all of the jobs were gone because of
Yeah.
the economy. It was I forget the exact number, but it was something crazy. Like the first time that program at UHart didn't have 100% placement rate in like 20 some years or something like that.
Wow.
And then like only I think only one or two of the people I graduated with got a job out of like 15 or something. Uh, it
That's
was
rough.
yeah. So, but it was a blessing to me because it just pushed me right into music. It's like you don't have another choice. Like here we go.
Yeah.
And also right before I graduated, I had started Atlas Gray, the band, with my girlfriend Alex, who was also at Hart, as a jazz vocalist. Uh,
Hmm.
so we started playing together my senior year, and we were doing gigs on the side, that were his original music mixed with jazz standards and stuff. So we were doing gigs, and then when we started playing more of music that he had written, we were like, "Oh, we should start a band," kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and then the drummer John went to Berkeley, but he was a good friend of mine from middle school and high school.
Hmm.
So he ended up moving to Hartford too. So basically, the band started right as we graduated. So that was like my main thing from the get go, right out of college.
Yeah.
And then on the side, I was teaching guitar lessons.
Where were
For,
you? Where were you teaching?
I was teaching at Falsetti Music, and then I ended up teaching at Martocchio's in Simsbury. I think I did both for some time, some like gap, and then the Westminster School in Simsbury, private school, and then privately. So that's always been evolving.
Yeah.
Um,
I really want to ask you about the stuff that's happening now, but but whenever people are teaching
mhm,
and they teach over uh, a long period of time,
mhm.
which I get the sense that is has happened, or I don't know what the where you are with teaching lessons right now, but it feels like for me at least, it was at first it was a great way to make money, and then it was a very introspective process on how I understood the guitar and changed over time the more open I was.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely took like a ride with me. Um, it was, as all musicians know, it's a fantastic way to make money, and support your other endeavors
Right.
and give back, obviously, teaching is great. And I really enjoyed it at first, and then I loaded it up and I had so many students that I started to not enjoy it at all.
Yeah.
And it was just to the point where, if you taught X amount of lessons in a week, good luck practicing or playing or writing or anything because you're so burnt from that. The last thing you want to do is pick up a guitar now. Um, and in the meantime, I was doing all this other stuff with the band and other people and everything. So it sort of took this wave where I like loaded it up and then started chipping it way back, and other things were taking over. But my relationship with regards to your question, um, has changed with it a lot with that too, where it's in the beginning it was, cool. I'm doing this. I'm giving back. I'm helping people, realizing that you can teach, kind of thing. And then it was introspective, like you said, and it was like, wow, I learned a lot about myself and way more about the guitar when you have to actually break things down and explain it to other people.
Right.
And then as it hit that tipping point where, unfortunately at the time I really wasn't enjoying it, um, then it became more of like a job
Yeah.
that I wanted to get out of, you know. Um, and the hard part for me with that was that I always care, I'm never gonna do like a bad job at it. So like even though I didn't want to do it, I was still, obviously giving a lot of time to it and doing all that kind of stuff. So it took some big leaps, to like sort of carve that out. But then as that time has gone on, I think most musicians, myself included, in 2020 ended up teaching a little bit more than we have in a bit, um, because of COVID and, no gig,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But now my relationship with it is very different. Maybe it's because most of the people I teach are more advanced and, coming to me for a reason.
Yeah.
Mm, That's definitely part of it, I would think. But also, it's fun in a different way now. And I think it's because I have more to offer and I have different things to offer, after being out in the real world for a long time. Um, so
So what was the real world like? Because obviously we're talking about 2009. That was 11. No, that was 12 years ago.
yeah, now,
Wow.
yeah,
Whoa.
yeah.
Side note, another thing that dates me, and I'm sure you'll know the song as well, but we didn't buy the Peloton bike, but we got the app, which is like $12 a month, and so we've been doing that. And I did a 90s ride, and I hadn't listened to 90s music in a long time,
Hmm.
and they played Mbop,
Oh yeah,
and I there was just like a moment where I was like, wow, I'm only 33, but I was like, wow, I'm old. That was 30 years ago.
it was. And it's funny side note as well. My band and I were a part of this thing called CT Inclusive Arts, and
Yeah.
what that was based on, we got to, geez, that might have been 2 years ago now. 2 years ago, we got to hang out with Hanson and
Oh yeah.
stuff and meet them. Super nice guys. But it is
Oh,
fun
I'm sure.
when we were with them. It's like they all have a couple kids. We're at a bar, and then I'm like just imagining Bop as them like little kids like in this music video, and I'm just like, that's times have changed,
Yeah. I
So,
still need to listen to a couple of their albums. My Chris Bolton, shout out to Chris Bolton. He's the he I don't know what he's doing right now. I know Music and Arts is in some they have their own thing that they're dealing with, but
mhm.
he was the manager when I left Music and Arts, and he was always like, "No, you listen to their albums; they're pretty good."
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so I'll have to check that out.
yeah.
So I forget what we were talking about. Oh, so you finish school, you're
Mhm.
gigging. Um, Tell me what it's like to where you. I mean, I don't even know where you are. You in New York?
Oh, I'm in Simsbury, Connecticut.
You're in. Oh, okay. I'm in Cromwell. I could have.
Yeah, totally. Not
We
too
could have
far.
done this with masks on outside.
Totally, yeah. It'd be cold. It'd be Connecticut.
So tell me what what you did.
Yeah, so still to this day, the band has been the front and center project. So everything revolved around that. We recorded an EP. We put that out, shortly after school and started playing a bunch of gigs and working all that. That went great for a while, and then we decided to change the band name for some reasons. We ended up, working some business side of things that didn't work out, which, common in the music industry,
Right.
all learning experiences. Um, and that, really took over, excuse me, all those years
Hmm.
of doing, lots of shows, recording a lot, writing a lot. Um, and that leads us almost up to where we are now. But it was basically, the band front and center doing side things. I would play with other people here and then, like, like Isaac for a little while.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure there were a few others in there that I would, that I've worked with over the years. Um, and then up until I guess like a 3 or 4 years ago now, about 4 years ago, I started really getting into the production side of things. Um, I'd always been interested in, even since high school, I had had a recording set up and been,
Hmm.
doing that stuff. So it never really stopped for me. But when, after our business debacle with the band was over, we decided we were going to cut a bunch of demos and then get ready to record a record, because we had a ton of material, ready to go. So like, let's pick some songs, let's demo them out, that kind of thing. And when that process started, we wanted to do it on our own. So that was like my sort of gateway to be like, all right, I've
Yeah.
always loved this production stuff and engineering stuff. Let me put it to use on these demos. Um,
What what was your setup like? at that point? Were you doing this out of your own dwelling, or did you
Yeah.
guys go rent a space?
It was actually in this house.
Oh, wow.
We used to all live here, all except for one of us, which is
Wow.
but this room did not look like this at the time. You
Sure.
but I had like a little two-channel interface. Yeah, it was just two channels literally, which is crazy. And then what we would, how did I do that? Okay, it was a two-channel interface with a mixer that we used for live sound that I used to,
Mm,
so we had more
yeah.
channels.
Yeah.
And we set up in the basement, where we used to rehearse, where it's, not very nice down there. Um, and we cut these demos of all the
Yeah.
tracks on the record, all but a couple. So that was like, all right, now I'm like gonna, dive into this kind of stuff and start learning it big time. So
What did it?
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, what did that feel like to discover that that
Well,
was something that yeah.
I mean, it was sort of like I always loved it. Like I was saying, it was always, a heavy interest of mine. And all day I would record guitar and mess with sounds and do all that kind of stuff. But it was like, oh, cool. We have our own thing going, and this is an opportunity for me to just mess with it. And I think one thing in hindsight that was important about it was that it was like a very low pressure thing because it was demos. So I didn't have any reservations. It was like, let's just do it, let's figure it out, like doesn't matter, let's rock it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was great. And then that really spurred my interest big time. That just sent me off the deep end, in that world. um, and then then I ended up, where do we go from there? It's a puzzle. Um, yeah, so I went deep on all that kind of stuff, and then that led me to playing more sessions for people.
Okay.
Because I sort of, just through all of our connections that we have and stuff, how everything's built, I started talking to people in that regard, like, hey, I'll play on your record, or whatever. And the experience in the production engineering side helped a lot, because if somebody hired me to do that, I could do it at my own place,
Yeah.
and do that for them. They would come over, or I could do it and send it to them, or whatever.
So you were getting a lot of these gigs, these studio related work
Mhm.
um through word of mouth.
Yeah, pretty much everything has
And
been.
and
Yeah.
the reason that I say that is because so much of production now has such an online component. One of the first episodes I did, it may have been the first one with my friend Ben Bishop.
Mhm.
He made his sort of mark he got his start after college, going to Nashville
Mhm.
and being an online producer for hire.
Mhm.
A lot of people would come to his place to record things, and he had a nice booth set up, and he would track stuff there. But a lot of the stuff that he was doing was this sort of, um, I think he started on like Fiverr or something like that, and then that eventually grew into people going to his website and saying, I wrote some lyrics. Can you set this to music? Or I think he was involved with like the app for The Voice or something like that, where they were like, oh, you need to make -1 tracks for this, or you need to master this, or I don't remember what it was exactly. But so much of his work was advertising and doing that online back and forth stuff. But you're talking about a time, I mean, 10 years ago isn't that long ago, but I think it was more of that in-person stuff was still sort of the way to do it.
Well, and I think
Um,
in my scenario, it continues to be.
yeah,
Almost everything is word of mouth. Um, Pretty much everything, even to this day. You know, I need to get better about online promotion, and I'm working on that now. But it's I've never really pushed that end of things yet.
yeah.
Um,
Talk about what that's how you got better at it. So you cut demos for your band.
mhm.
It was sort of a low risk way for you to see if you really like it. You got into it. You're
Mhm.
getting to know people. You're playing guitar for people, but also doing engineering stuff.
Yeah.
How does that then come into the picture of teaching, gigging, jazz? Talk about that.
Yeah, well, at this point, I've definitely left the jazz thing behind fully, other than the knowledge. That was only like a couple years after school that I never played a jazz gig again or since. Once again, not for a lack of love for it. I love it, but, it's just not my bag.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, like you said, everything was sort of born out of necessity. And I think getting better at it just came from getting gigs. There nothing really crazy or fancy. I would research constantly, listen to interviews with people, lots of just trial and error, like it is with anything, just learning the equipment, learning how to use it, training your ear. But almost all of that for me came from just actually doing it. It's like if I had done a couple guitar tracks for somebody and then they were like, well, I'd like something like this. If I hadn't done it before, I'd have to then figure that out and learn that and add that to like the repertoire of like capabilities or knowledge or whatever. And then moving into like hip hop or recording vocals and all that kind of stuff, it's like, hey, could you do this? Yes, I'll figure it out. Is like the answer kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think almost all of it came from just opportunities, taking them and then using them to learn. Um,
I always loved I always loved I've only had a handful of experiences in recording studios, but I always loved how highly regarded the technicians were.
oh yeah,
Either if it was the producer or the engineer or somebody that adjusted a microphone.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I just loved that environment. Um, where were you when we needed you? I was in a Motown band for a little while.
No,
And without, do you know Alfredo Grotto?
yes, I know who he is, and I met him once, I believe,
Yeah.
many years ago. But yeah,
He's maybe I should get him on the show. He's full of knowledge and he's done a little bit of everything. And I
hmm
was in a band with him with Elena Duffy. I don't know if you remember her.
I was very good friends with Elena Duffy in college, actually. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah, we were with her, a couple other people, nobody else from what's his name? When our first drummer left, Charlie Dye.
Oh yeah, Charlie. He's the man.
Yeah,
He lives right
yeah.
around the corner from me.
Does he?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
That's awesome. Anyway, we went to this recording studio to record some Motown covers, and these guys were primarily hip hop guys. And I don't remember how the whole thing happened, but it was just a mess. But I went to go walk around because I like to go get in trouble. And I left our booth. It was this huge, like, studio apartment building in East Hartford.
Yeah,
And I went into, I don't even remember what it was. I just walked into somebody's session and
yeah,
it
yeah.
was like a hip hop room. And it was like, I'm sure you can imagine, but it was a party and it was exactly what you would think it would be in the music videos. But I was like, oh, is that, I don't know, Omnisphere? Is that this? Is that that? And the engineer was like talking to me like, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was super cool stuff. I love that kind of stuff.
It's fun. It's really
Yeah.
fun. It's a never-ending world, and every experience is different and unique, and there's always something to learn. So it never gets boring. That's for sure.
Today, what would you say most of your production gigs, or as you said in the email, you said commercial music. So like that kind of stuff, what are most of those gigs like?
Um, this year it's been quite different because of COVID. But if we go the year before that, there were a bunch of different things. It would either be I get hired by somebody remotely saying, let me send you a bunch of tracks and play guitar on these.
Hmm.
Sometimes with direction, sometimes without. Do what you want, or here's what we actually want on this. Other times it would be hired to go play in a studio for somebody
Hmm.
or to tour with somebody, you know, um, if I was going to be like a sideman as opposed to, with my band. And then other instances would be with, my buddy Rob, we would be producing an artist or a band together from the ground up, whether a song or more than one song. It could be recording and writing music for licensing, which Rob and I did a lot of. So
Yeah.
instrumental tracks of all different styles for commercial use. Um, it could be, well, obviously the band stuff, that's its own thing. Um, it could be people coming to me just to record something and then go. You know, sometimes people just want to use your capability to record. You know, whether let me just cut some vocal tracks for a demo. I've done even just demos for people, or
Right.
you know, could you help me record guitar for this thing or do a video for something? You know, so it's really like it's a crazy array of stuff, but I
Yeah.
feel like that's what you want to do in order to have a constant flow of work is
What are
to
some of the acts that you've played with? Because you said tour. What?
I toured in 2017 with Stephen Kellogg,
Oh, I
um,
know that name.
Americana rock like singer
Yeah.
songwriter. He's fantastic. We did a national tour as a trio,
Wow.
and that was fun. For me, it was challenging and fun because I got to play electric acoustic guitar, lap steel, and bass
Wow.
because it was me, a drummer, and him playing acoustic guitar and singing. So I was sort of like the Swiss Army, you know, rotating utility piece,
Yeah.
which was fun. And I was actually subbing for his normal guitar player on that tour, but because of that, we made it all like its own thing, or he did, you know.
Yeah.
And that was a blast. It was an absolute blast.
How do you get a gig like that? Is that through mostly you being known as a studio guitar player?
That was word of mouth again.
Yeah.
You know, my buddy Rob, you know, once again had played it with him a bunch of times, played
Yeah.
gigs with him. So when, you know, almost always those gigs come from somebody knowing somebody.
Yeah.
Because if, like, for example, you know, that instance, if, hey, my guitar player can't do this tour, let me call somebody else I play with and say, do you know any guitar players? Kind of thing.
Right.
Because people, you know, I think for the most part, people are um, cautious about who they recommend, you know. So if you call a good friend and they give you a recommendation, people tend to trust that for sure. And
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
I need a recommendation for something, I would absolutely trust one of my peers, you know, friends.
Right.
Um, and I mean that process is way easier than like being like let's hold auditions or let's you know do all this kind of stuff. It's like, give me somebody that I know is personally cool and can do the gig, and you know, we'll start from there, kind of thing. But that seems to be how most of that comes about, you know, regardless.
Yeah. Can we take some time and talk about all the goodies in that room?
Sure. Yeah. Rig rundown.
Let's do it. Oh, I love those videos. Even though I don't play electric anymore, I'll still watch those any day of the week.
And,
My
uh,
favorite is whenever they go to Eric Johnson and he's just such a nutbag, but
oh yeah.
he's so
Super,
good.
yeah, super particular. He gets the sound though, you know.
He absolutely, yeah.
Um,
So let's yeah, wherever you want to start. I'm looking at that pedal board. You don't have to move the camera. You could just tell me kind of what it does and
yeah,
just what your philosophy is.
this the big one back behind this one is my main studio and gigging board. Um, I use that mainly in the studio to cover, you know, as much as possible of whatever anybody would desire or I would desire. Uh,
Hmm.
Built for versatility and travel and all that kind of stuff, even though it's pretty big. I also use that for the band because I'm very, in the music I create with the band, I'm very particular about the guitar sounds and achieving what we achieved in the studio live. Um, and
Very disappointing when you see a band who doesn't do that.
Yeah, for me it is for sure.
Yeah.
It's just like I love to hear that, and you know, once again tapping into the production side of things. The new band record that is gonna start rolling out this year.
Hmm.
Um, Through all that, I ended up producing and engineering that. So then I'm like, my head is way more into that side. So then I
Right.
became very particular about let's design something that can achieve that. You know.
Side note, we'll get back to the gear. You know who's really good at recreating that sound is Weezer.
Oh,
Um,
really? That's awesome.
and it's probably because their music is so simple, not that it's not good, not that it's not,
Oh, it's
some
amazing.
of it is difficult to play, but their music is very simply laid out. So you never have any issues with that. Whereas a band like Queen, Brian May does an excellent job of filling in the gaps, but you know there's something missing
Yeah.
when, I mean, God, Don't Try So Hard. I think that's the track where there's just like a dump of 20 guitars that pans, hard pans left and right. You know, there's only so much of that that you can do live. So that's wonderful that you take that into consideration.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting with the new music. A lot of this new music that's coming out on the new record, we've played live before for quite a while. Some of it we haven't, a lot of it we have. And I can now do the tones of the main parts that way. But I got to admit, I did take the liberties like Brian May did, and it layered many guitars on many tracks, parts that are not there. That
Yeah.
if I had another 10 fingers. Um, but yeah,
What? Yeah.
that's what that one's for.
Okay.
This one is a recent build that is mainly for reamping and production stuff, rather than live playing anything. So it's a lot of interesting like looper effects, tape effects, EQ, that kind of stuff. So I actually send vocals, drums, guitars, and synths out through that one. And
So when you say reamping, that means like if I were to record on a DI box into Logic Pro
yeah,
and then send it to you and I say I want to use that white amp in the back,
yeah,
that's what you mean by that. Okay.
yeah, that's one way for sure. And yeah, you can do that for people as a service too. I have a collection of amps, fortunately that are great. So if people
Yeah.
record DI, I could absolutely reamp and get them great tones and stuff. Uh,
Wow.
but reamping also applies to just, I mean, it's like a slang term for sending something out of the computer through a bunch of stuff and then back in. So
Yeah.
like that's when it comes into synths and drums and all
Sure.
that kind of stuff. I could send anything through that board. I could send it through anything, but that one in particular is made with that in mind.
Hmm.
And it allows you to add some really cool sounds and textures to synthesizers especially, and basically anything. But another fun aspect of that, that's a deeper kind of topic, is when you do this kind of stuff versus using a plugin
Right.
in the software, it makes you commit to it, because I have to find the settings I like, find the sound I like, and then record it back in, and then
Wow.
it's done. Whereas a plugin, you could tweak it for days.
Right.
You put it up and, I like that. No, I'll change it. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in a way, I sort of like the psychological aspect of doing things this way, because it forces you to commit to something and make a creative decision on the spot,
Right. Right. Wow.
um, which is cool. But yeah, so that's what that's for. And guitar fun, of course.
Of course.
A few different amplifiers of all different kinds, extra guitars and whatnot. Guitars. Yeah.
What's your favorite electric guitar that you own? Or God, that's such a terrible question, and I shouldn't have asked you. I'm a guitar player, and I shouldn't have asked you that question. Shame on me.
I gotta go. No,
Yeah, right, right. Oh, your Wi-Fi is freezing.
yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about a guitar, one or two, that means something to you, and why it means that.
Oh wow. Well, that's a deep question, and actually, it's like I was prepared, which is funny. This guitar, um,
Oh wow.
means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of which, this was it's built by Trevor Healy Guitars. I own two of his guitars, this one and another electric. But this guitar was a surprise gift that I did not know was happening.
Oh,
Um, which is why it means so much. A fully custom build from Trevor, who worked on it for a year without me knowing,
that's incredible.
and it was a gift from my dad.
Oh wow.
And it's I'm always up at his shop. Can't
Yeah.
recommend him enough. Trevor Healy, to all guitarists, if you need anything done, custom built,
Yeah.
repairs, modifications. He's in East Hampton, Mass.
Okay.
But he's a great friend, and I've been going to him for years, almost probably a decade now. But I was always up there having things done to my other guitars, working on them, just fixing things, whatever. And through that entire amount of time, he managed to get specs out of my head that would be like perfect for this without me ever knowing, which was crazy. So then one day he, was like, you need to come up and check something out and try out this new guitar, before I, sell it to somebody. And I was like, cool, sure. So came up there, and it was funny because, my dad actually came up to visit that weekend, so they had planned all this out. But I was like, okay. So we went up there and had dinner and stuff, and was checking stuff out. And then he was like, yeah, check this out. And I was like, oh man, it's fantastic. And then I did not know it was for me. you know.
That is wow.
Yeah, so this means a ton to me, for sure. And it's a fantastic instrument, like all of his work is.
Yeah.
And I have to say, subjectively, non-biased, I would have said this before this guitar. Um, his stuff is by far some of the best I've ever played.
Yeah.
And I own a PRS that I really love. I have like a Sir,
Oh wow.
like a lot of fortunate to have a lot of really great instruments, and
Yeah.
these, these have something special about them that's on that level, if not farther.
Sure.
Um, and
What do you think it is?
um, I mean, his raw ability to build them,
Sure.
I would think, but his consideration for what somebody's going for in an instrument and
Yeah.
the way that they play,
Yeah.
and maybe that is slightly biased because he built these for me, so he knows the way I approach an instrument, kind of thing. Um,
But
but
and I mean if it's a perfect fit, it's a perfect I mean
yeah,
if we're talking about an empty puzzle piece that was filled in, the question is who can make a puzzle piece that doesn't wiggle or you have to push a little bit harder or I
totally.
mean,
It's that, and everybody else I've known that has used these on sessions. If I'm with them or have just messed with these,
yeah,
all pretty much feel the same way, that they're spectacular in a lot of ways, and every,
that's so wonderful.
um,
That's a can I see the back of it?
oh yeah, totally. Yeah. So it's all mahogany.
Wow,
Um, this green actually
gorgeous.
matches my other guitar from him.
Oh my goodness.
Um, but yeah,
And then is the neck finished?
it's finished, but satin.
Oh, that's it. That's the way to go.
It's like the back of the, yeah.
That's oh my goodness.
Um,
What an incredible instrument. And I'm sure it sounds wonderful too. Do you know what kind of pickups did he put in it?
these are Lollertrons, so they're like a humbucker version of a Supertron made by Lollar.
Hmm. Wow.
Fantastic sound, super unique but great. Um, and yeah, I actually, you can attest to all these things, when you play these, but um, Telefunken microphones.
Sure.
Um, it did a session with Humphreys McGee, um, at the beginning of 2020, and their cartage with their gear had missed, um, the window for them to get it there.
Oh no.
So they used all of my stuff along with a couple other guitar players from town.
They
Um,
used your stuff.
yeah, yeah. So he ended up playing one of the guitars ended up playing my other Healy guitar.
Yeah.
Um, and he had picked up the PRS, the Sir, all these, and then he picked that
Wow.
this one. He was like hands down. He didn't want to give it back.
I gotta ask you, how do you so how what's the connect for a gig like that? Because they're not, I mean, they're not fish famous, but they're pretty big in that world.
That's just through Telefunken mics. They're good friends of mine,
Wow.
and
That's
everybody in the
incredible.
studio. They're big supporters of all of us. Fantastic people. Alan there and a bunch of other good friends who work there and design there. They're all great. Um, and yeah, they just needed some gear, so they called up.
Big shout out whoever's watching this. If it's more than just my mother and father, big shout out to word of mouth because
Absolutely.
I think and it's funny. I told you to listen to the Mike Day episode, and a lot of Mike's story is about word of mouth.
Totally.
And I'm not sure. I haven't looked at how much mine is, but but you just get things and you get to places and you make life decisions based on
Hmm.
relationships that come and go. And in one way, by me working at a school and having that sort of be a stagnant in terms of a musician's career because we're always all over the place. But
Hmm.
I sort of miss, a part of me really misses that sort of drive to just see as how many threads I can pull and how many seeds I can plant.
Well, yeah, and
But
I think it's a really fun aspect to the industry, is being able to meet people, collaborate with people, learn
yeah,
from people. Like you were saying initially, you can learn just as much from your peers as you can, famous teachers or,
yeah, absolutely.
um, and I feel like all of us for, more than a decade now have been learning together.
Yeah,
It's been very cool to see the scene in Hartford grow so strong, and the guitar community, and in every sense, every instrument, production,
yeah,
everything. It's been fantastic to see it grow, and also fortunate to be a part of it. Um, and I think one of the things that's so cool to see in hindsight, over the years now, which it'll continue to do the same thing, but everybody, we all started out as like, we're out of college, we're starting bands, we're starting projects, we're gigging, we're doing all this kind of stuff. And then as we've all grown as musicians and artists and everything, it's sort of evolved into people finding their own lane,
yeah,
which is really cool. And people develop skill sets and end up doing this or that in addition to whatever else they're doing or instead of.
yeah,
Um, and it's been fantastic to watch. And one of the coolest aspects about Hartford, or this scene in Connecticut, that I feel like is very unique to this scene is that there's so many people doing so many things that our resources are actually very deep. If I need X, Y, and Z, there's a million people to call for those things, but we
absolutely.
all have such a different approach or a different style that it never feels like a competition. It never does. Everybody's just sort of helping each other out with whatever their skill set is.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's pretty unique. And it's maybe just because we're in a smaller scene like Connecticut, we're not in LA or Nashville or New York. But whatever it is, it's fantastic, and it's fun.
I think I noticed that too. I felt it sort of competitive at the very entry level to whatever it is that you're doing. But as soon as you rise above that, you're right. There's a lot of people that are there to help you, and
Yeah.
it's we sort of come together in our solitude of, there's only so many gigs, there's only so many venues to play out here, so you might as well make friends with the people
Yeah.
that play those gigs. Before we go, what are the keyboards on your other side?
This is just a MIDI controller. Um, just a normal
Yeah.
MIDI controller.
And what about the that big boy over there?
A Moog sub fatty synth.
Oh boy.
Um,
Does it go burp, burp, burp?
it does. If you want it to. But yeah, it's fantastic as well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. After we hit the stop button, I'll get some details from you. We're gonna link everything up below.
Cool.
I wanna promote everything that you're doing right now. It's been a pleasure, and let's end with one final thought. If somebody was trying to get into the sort of the production aspect of what you're doing,
Mhm.
uh, what would you tell them? Let me rephrase that question. What would you tell 16, 17, 18-year old Andy trying to figure out, somebody in his shoes, what to figure out what to do?
I would say follow your passion, follow what you're interested in. It's very easy for us psychologically, mentally, with society and other things to get sort of boxed in, and say, well, I'm a guitar player, I'm this, I'm that. I would urge myself at that age, or anybody listening, to, think big, think outside the box, um, and try to, never label yourself, or pin yourself down. If something interests you, go for it.
Yeah.
That interest is what's going to fuel you to be, to learn it, to be successful at it. Um, and That's what I would say is just, if you're interested in it, go for it. There's no reason not to. I didn't go to school for any of that stuff, but it's a huge part of my job now. So it's really just whatever you're interested in, whatever you're passionate about. Don't be afraid to try it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure.